Today on the show, we have DeFi Dad, a DeFi super user, educator, and angel, as well as someone whose content I've been watching for probably about 4 years now.
Patrick, thanks for having me. Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah, welcome. So I gave your brief intro before, but to start, why don't you introduce yourself to viewers?
Yeah, so I have been making content about crypto, DeFi specifically, since about 2020. I've actually been in the space only since 2017. Still feels like it's not been that long of a time, but I guess now that's like 7 going on 8 years. Uh, After my first year of just kind of exploring crypto and buying a little bit of ether and bitcoin and watching it go up in price and then crash during the 2018 bear market, I ended up getting a job eventually at Consensus. And so I had the opportunity to work there for maybe 2 years with teams like MetaMask or Gitcoin and all the other like startups that were incubating there. And then in 2020, really, like, for me, the inflection point in my career was Zapper had, I believe, 3 folks on board in total, which were all founders, plus maybe there was like 1 employee before me. And I got to go work there for a year. And then since then, in 2021, I've been investing full time at Fourth Revolution Capital. And we're a venture fund. We focus a lot on the DeFi space, but other types of Web3 use cases as well. And to this day, I'm creating the Edge podcast with my partner and producer, Nomadic. So we do a podcast with, I think, similar guests to what you have, Patrick. We're really focused on the builders. We're focused on early investors, actually new investors as well, and all the new faces that are, sort of defining the industry that we work in. But yeah, that's basically me in a nutshell over the past 7 to 8 years.
Cool. So you've been doing a lot of stuff. You are a power user, of course. You're making content. You are investing. You've worked at a protocol. How do you balance all that?
So nowadays, I mean, I'm fortunate the fact that, like, as an investor, I think I've been able to get, a lot of leverage, not just like the leverage of like borrowing on chain or so, but being able to have placed some bet in multiple teams. I've invested in about 75 startups over the past 4 years, and then there's probably about 50 teams we've invested in through Fourth Revolution Capital. And so it's really allowed me to have like that bird's eye view of the best practices among like the best founders. There's obviously a lot of duds in there. I've had plenty of investments go to zero already, or probably should declare that they're at zero. But along the way, there's been some just amazing opportunities to learn from folks. I feel like EtherFi and Puffer Finance are 2 of the more remarkable founders I've had the chance to work with over the last few years. Those folks are, in a like sort of a bleeding edge space. And so, yeah, I've been able to like watch them grow from no sort of following, no sort of value really deposited into their protocols to, now they're in the billions. But going back to the question about just balancing, I think many years ago, I figured out what I was good at. And despite a lot of discomfort and a lot of pressure to kind of, get in the lane that you're told to as like an adult, I have young kids, and, there's a lot of pressures there in real life to, provide for them, to have a family and so on. And I always wanted to obviously be rewarded for whatever it is I do best. And one of those things was it was a skill of just listening to others and really, building strong relationships, which kind of led me down the path of I could, work in BD or some sort of like new sales role in the crypto industry. But I also like really enjoyed the technical conversations. You know, I'm not gonna like talk to someone about Solidity coding, but I can appreciate all of the nuance of protocol design. And so, you know, that's what led to starting to create content. I think the content for me that I began creating in 2019, those were just tweets. I had no following. Like, you know, everyone starts out at zero. I was really careful to kind of watch and listen to folks that I thought were doing a good job in the space. And then it was probably by the end of 2019 that I was really starting to grow more confident that like I knew something others didn't. And that was strictly just that DeFi was the product market fit for Ethereum and for like all of crypto, and that this was an industry that was going to grow like a, I mean, at the time I remember thinking at $100 million of total value locked across like 5 or 6 apps, I really was on board with the fact like this is going to grow, you know, 100x easily over the next few years. I just didn't expect all of this to happen so quickly. Like it's crazy the growth since then, because I think today we're at collectively around $100 billion of total value locked.
Mm-hmm.
So TLDR on this is, I think folks who find their way into the crypto industry, you know, we're seeking a different path, and you have to figure out what is that transferable skill set and how can I be a value add to others. And I really do believe to this day, like just working really hard at your craft, whether it's podcasting or building a protocol or coding, whatever, you learn so much in this industry in a short amount of time. And then I do believe like being good to others like really comes back to you. And I think I'm probably most proud of my ability to, you know, create positive relationships over the last several years. And, you know, just honestly, just be a nice person to others. Like if you can help others, like there's no doubt you create like a lot of like good karma that comes back to you. And
that's for sure. Do you remember how we met?
You know, is it just through like a DM? I feel like I might have reached out at some point and just said, I really like your content. I think I did, right? Is that just said like, I really like what you stand for?
It was almost 2 years ago. I posted on Twitter that I was considering changing the name of my channel from Dynamo DeFi to Dynamo Crypto. And you posted a very thoughtful, long comment on it, going through the reasons why to or to not. And then I sent a DM saying, "Oh, thank you so much for the detailed response." And then you sent me the things you said, like that you liked the energy I was putting out there, the content, the way I was analyzing DeFi. And 2 years later, we're friends. Who knew?
Yeah, but it's awesome. It's a great example. Like there's a different path. Obviously, all of us could take, and you can be cutthroat and competitive, and like, you know, there's no doubt. Like I suffer from jealousy and envy, like everybody. Like I have my own faults, and you know, I'm still human. But sometimes the forcing mechanism of like paying someone a compliment, like it really goes far. You know, I actually, before we started the podcast, we were just kind of chatting, and you know, you were pointing out, I mean, something I think I sort of live by, which is I just don't want to actively be out there creating enemies in the industry. Sometimes the growth of my own content following account, you know, falters because I'm not out there like fighting with people on Twitter, but I sleep really well. You know, I have, you know, a lot of joy in my life, and I don't want to be thinking about some like banter on Twitter when I'm like at my kid's little league game. Like I just want to enjoy myself and be able to tune out for the 5 minutes before the crypto markets crash as we go on vacation and ruin the mood. So
yeah, totally. So I was thinking of something you said about honing your craft, as well as thinking about what unique skills you have. Recently, I recorded a rare YouTube video that I didn't post, and I may post it eventually. It was a little too different than my normal content, where it was about how to grow a brand online. So not actually
interesting
crypto, but actually not explicitly about crypto, because I get a lot of questions about it. And one of the things I talked about is it's really helpful to take 2 skills you have and think about how you can combine them. Because, in my case, I have some knowledge of econ and finance, but there's people who have far more, right? Who have been working in the industry for decades or have PhDs or all those things. And I also think I'm pretty good at explaining things. I feel like if I had to nail like my one content creator skill, it's probably explaining things. And there's people who are also, exceptional at explaining things and are teachers or talented enough to be a teacher. But combining the two, there's far fewer people who both understand uh, difficult finance or economic concepts and are good at explaining things. And so combining those two into making explanatory videos about crypto was really helpful for me. And so I think about that's like another thing people can take is, like you said, podcasting, or maybe they're a developer and thinking about how they can combine that with some other skill to do something that no one else in the world can do.
I think that's the key too, is trying to look for something that fewer people are doing. So like, I guess to go back on one thing I said, like there are a lot of podcasts in the space. So like, I guess I'm not encouraging like everyone to go out and do a podcast. We probably have too many of those, but if you feel like you have something to say and you think it's going to be valuable, well, throw that out the window and you might as well give it a try. I mean, there's not a lot of barriers to entry there. Actually, I still would swear to this day with the Edge podcast, we use it as a platform to do due diligence. Sometimes it's just getting caught up on a project. Like obviously there's guests on the show that I've invested in, and I'm using it as a way to like get fully caught up with their story and making sure that like I can articulate that to others. But then there have been many guests where we've actually followed up and been able to invest after the fact. Actually, EtherFi came to us in spring 2023, and Nomadic can attest this. I really didn't want to do a show on it. I just could not understand like restaking, why they were doing what they're doing, especially knowing what Rocket Pool and Lido had already accomplished. But like per usual, we kind of trust each other's guts. And I said, all right, let's do the show. Like we'll at least learn something. And going through that process, I was, really blown away by Mike Siligadzi and the team and understanding like where restaking was going. Well, fast forward 6 months, like we're keeping in touch. They've got like 30 million deposited, and I'm really starting to understand restaking. I'm starting to understand Eigenlayer more. And then they release a product. This kind of goes back to probably a bit of edge that you and I have as being users. Like as a user, I knew logging into ether.fi how incredibly valuable it was to be able to deposit into ETH within, it was just one click. It was, one transaction, cheap gas, even though gas on mainnet was a little more expensive at that time. And so it was like rewind 6 months ago, they had 30 million deposited, and they ended up growing to billions shortly after this. And we were able to invest. And it was because there was a relationship that had been created. We had been supportive of them, I think, when less folks were interested. But simultaneously, like they had also been supportive of us. The fact that they came to us, that really meant something to me. And so I was proud of it. And that to this day, clearly, it's like, I think it's one of the best stories of us using our skill set as users, using the podcast as a platform to do due diligence out in the open, but then also being able to act on that as an investor. I do remember like screaming at Nomadic, like, with excitement, like, I'm like, oh my God, I feel like the whole world doesn't understand this yet. Like the whole restaking thing is, Eigenlayer's got a lot of attention, but I feel like they don't understand the restaking protocols, these operators like an EtherFi or Puffer or Renzo or all the other players in the space. So anyways, it's been a journey to understand what is my transferable skill set, where do I have like my own edge, which is why we call the Edge podcast the Edge. How can I act on that? How can I add value to the space and help create more adoption of crypto?
Love it. Yeah, I think one thing that is valuable for people who are thinking about trying to either build some sort of content platform is it gives you something you can offer that is very difficult to buy, which is trust. It's very difficult for people to buy trust. It has to kind of be built over time, and that's one reason to actually build a content brand. Funny you mentioned there being a lot of podcasts. I am actually launching one this week.
That's exciting. What's it called?
Name pending, but it's with the calculator guy.
Oh,
And
DeFi Dojo. Oh, I love
DeFi
that
Dojo.
guy.
It's with the calculator guy and Jesse Eckel.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh,
The three,
great for you guys.
yeah,
That'll
the
be
three
a
of us
great
are launching
podcast.
one. We're still sort of aligning on exactly what the format is going to be. We were workshopping some different things, but that probably, depending on when this episode comes out, the first episode will be around the same time this video comes
Oh,
out. But
that's
I agree
that's a
that
great combo.
there's many podcasts, but they reached out and they both have larger followings than me, so I and
I'll tell you
also
what,
are generally high integrity, great guys. So I was happy to want
absolutely. I think one thing that I've learned over the years, and I'm excited for all of you, then teaming up with folks is such a great idea. Like I really enjoy the banter, of talking with, multiple folks on my own team, so in this case with Nomadic, I just really enjoy being able to like partner with someone, to know that I've got someone else in my corner. Plus we're really good friends. So like, it's like a total joy to record every episode. And for you guys, like, that's going to be some great banter. Like you all have your own specialties. Gosh, what's the other one? 0x Steady Lads Steady Lads with Jordy. They have like a great banter. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
like Bankless has always had great banter. Blockworks, Empire, that they've got great banter. It matters,
Mm-hmm.
Kudos to anyone who can be a solo host.
Yeah,
I think with tutorials it makes more sense.
tutorials to do, and then we're the one interviews like this I like, and part of it is getting to know people, right? We already know each other, of course. We've met in person, but there's other people, for example, like recently I interviewed Sam Kazmian from Frax, and he and I have DM'd once or twice, but never really talked before. So it's nice to be able to actually talk to people, and people are more willing to talk to you when you have a YouTube channel with tens of thousands of subscribers than they are if you just reach out. Some great people are willing to talk anyways, but it's sometimes an easier sell because you have something to offer.
It's hard to think through all the different protocols that you end up covering on a podcast. Like you're basically having to be prepared as like a high level expert of everything, expert enough to ask questions, to like, we all kind of have to like, listen and get out of the way of the guest. But it's also just, really important that like we're prepared. And I would say most of my interviews through the Edge podcast, like, we're playing around with applications. We're thinking through those questions. I mean, there's folks like you and a few others where I feel like I'm more already on the same page and I'm not like as worried, but like I think the worst nightmare, right, is to get off of a podcast and not ask some like really important question, about the protocol. So yeah, no, I couldn't be more excited for you guys. I'll have to tune in for that as well.
Thank you. Yeah. And speaking of important questions, let's dive in a little more into you. First one, DeFi Dad, was that always your name? Or did you have another brand first?
So it's funny. I had a Twitter handle originally that just the name, not the handle, but it said Crypto Dad. And gosh, there was a guy at the CFTC. I'm forgetting his name now, but he had already been sort of branded as Crypto Dad. He did a nice job of like sticking up for the industry when it wasn't, when it was really dark time still, like especially in the US with regulators. And anyways, this kind of goes back to how you decided to stick with Dynamo DeFi. I remember it was December 2019 and I rebranded my name, and took on this brand of like DeFi Dad over Crypto Dad. I just remember thinking, what if I'm pigeonholing myself into something that doesn't continue onward? And, you know, the whole crypto industry is obviously going to continue to grow. But man, it was like probably I would argue it's one of the best bets I ever made. Like
That was
just
before DeFi
owning that.
summer, so that was
Yes.
early for
Yeah.
DeFi. Yeah.
Yeah. I have felt to be fair though, too, I've felt outdated at times with like how there's been all of these like, you know, narratives that have changed over the years. So during like the NFT, you know, summer, whatever you want to call that in 2021, you know, I was like, am I supposed to cover NFTs as well? I mean, I do think of like OpenSea and I mean anything where you're connecting a wallet as DeFi. Maybe it, you know, the trustlessness or permissionlessness of it wasn't quite there with some of the NFT platforms. But then fast forward to like now we have this like crossover of AI with crypto, and we've just got all these different narratives. But I will say the one thing that keeps like chugging along and building momentum, and thankfully is like still I think like the ultimate product market fit for crypto is DeFi. Like thank God for you and me. Thank God.
Thank God. Yeah. And the thing is, I think about it, not only is it the ultimate product market fit, is so many other things can encompass DeFi or be incorporated into it, right? If you have AI tokens, they're using finance in some form, right? They have a token, and they either have smart contracts to manage their payments, or they have a token that needs to be traded, and it's going to be traded through DeFi. Same thing with real world assets and all of the forms of adoption in that way, or stable coins. You know, you could consider some of that DeFi. Thankfully for us again. But I've had the same concern. I think part of it is also that DeFi is, you know, it's decentralized finance, right? That's what it is. Crypto is, for me at least, I love crypto, but in some people's mind, they don't know what it is. They think of the tokens that are being traded, whereas decentralized finance, it's very a clear value proposition.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the proof is in like the continued growth of liquidity on chain. The fact that DeFi started as an Ethereum thing, and that was like, you know, that was wonderful because Ethereum was in the doldrums coming out of 2018, 2019. I don't think like some of the doldrums here around price action for ETH in 2024, I don't think it comes even close to back then. It does feel pretty dismal right now. I know there's been a lot of like, there's just been a lot of upset feelings over the price of Ether not, you know, outperforming the way it has in past cycles. But we're in a place now where my point in all of this is DeFi has grown beyond Ethereum. It still has its biggest home on Ethereum, and I'm speaking strictly to just liquidity on Ethereum mainnet. Then if you were to encompass what's on the L2s, or whether you separate it, they're just exciting, unique, individual communities of like-minded folks who are really into DeFi. But then I think like you really hit it out of the park being early to Solana DeFi in 2023, prior to it really exploding with the Jito airdrop. So that actually truthfully was what got me like so on board. I was kind of like watching and listening to like what you were saying about, you know, there's a lot more here than people are giving credit to, like you should pay attention. And so thank God I started playing around more, revisiting Solana DeFi, and I'm very impressed by just like all the mind share there, you know, in the Solana community. That said, again, like being a DeFi dad or a Dynamo DeFi, like I try to, you know, keep myself spread across wherever there are great builders, wherever there are great applications, wherever there's an ecosystem that's thriving. And I think right now, again, I still would rank Ethereum, you know, as the top community based on just, you know, liquidity and mind share. But like, man, like Solana's mind blowing, like what they've built. And I mean, I'm a Solana token holder too, so I count
Mhm.
myself in that community. So
Yeah, and the fortunate thing is you can be a member of multiple communities, which some people maybe have trouble with that, but there's no
yeah.
reason you can't be a member of
Oh, I don't want to leave
multiple.
out too Bitcoin DeFi. I'm forgetting. So we
Yeah,
covered
that's been
L2,
huge.
Solana, and then we've got Bitcoin DeFi, which is, I think credit to Stacks. It starts with Stacks, but now we've got Merlin, and we've got, just lots of other, communities that are
There's
sprouting
a
up
whole
there.
bunch now, and there's DeFi Llama has a whole section with Bitcoin Bitcoin DeFi because there's maybe, let's see, I'll take a look now. I think there's 10
Yeah.
or so. There's 9 that have over $10 million in TVL and 4 that have over 100 million.
What
There's
is the
been-
next highest one after Merlin?
So there's right now the biggest is BitLayer actually.
BitLayer. Oh wow,
BitLayer,
wow. Don't even know
BitLayer,
what that is. That's
BitLayer
mind
is big.
blowing.
Rootstock, Core, B Squared, BounceBit, Bob. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, there's
Bob's another one. Yeah, forgive me
Bob's
for
another one.
forgetting Bob. They're still
Yeah.
pretty early, but yeah, that's another group of builders who are like they come from like an EVM background, and so they're trying to harness the lessons from building EVM
Mhm,
applications for that new community. Full disclosure, by the way, I'm an investor in Bob, as
mhm,
I like mentioned that, but yeah, it's exciting because for years, I guess if you wanted to separate like Bitcoin backed DeFi from ETH backed DeFi, we've seen Bitcoin backed DeFi or like seen it used as collateral or in liquidity provisions. That's just continued to grow. There's always been this huge appetite because if you can hold a tokenized form of Bitcoin and enjoy the price action, the upside over a longer term, as Bitcoin being a store of value, but you can also earn passively with that. That's exciting. So yeah, it's no surprise. Eigenlayer, as of this recording, I don't believe has uh, approved any sort of Bitcoin yet as an asset, but like it's expected to come, at some point here. And I know that there's what Karak, I think that now supports it. Symbiotic does as well. And so now we're seeing these Bitcoin LRTs. Like I think the top one is Solve BTC
mhm,
Babylon, which is exciting because Babylon has launched since sometime before this podcast.
mhm,
And then we've also got EBTC. I just checked this out today by EtherFi is at around 36 million. And then Swell has one called SWBTC that's around 31 million. So, these are like teeny tiny numbers compared to where we're going. Like
mhm,
as long as you look at the Bitcoin market cap, as long as we're talking about like 1% of value or less of its market cap being tokenized or tokenized and restaked, I mean, all you have to do is compare it to like how much Sol is being used in DeFi on Solana, how much ETH is being used in DeFi across Ethereum. Like it's wild. So, that's why when someone asks, are you bullish on DeFi? Do you think like there's a lot of growth ahead this year? I'm just like, look at where the industry came from.
mhm,
Look at all the opportunity ahead with Bitcoin now becoming a more prominent crypto asset, even more so than it's always been. Number one market cap and probably the second most used collateral across DeFi. It really could actually give ETH or assuming Sol continues to grow as well. It could give them a run for its money.
mhm. Yeah, one thing I always say is that there's a very small percentage of Bitcoin actually has to enter DeFi for it to be at least the number 2 chain, right? 1% of Bitcoin enters DeFi.
Yeah.
It would be the number 2 chain by total value locked. And I think a lot more than that can, because you think about all of that value that's waiting to be unlocked, either because it can be turned into a yield bearing asset through restaking or lending, or people want to otherwise provide liquidity, use it as collateral. It's really exciting. So my question next would be, which chain are you using the most personally right now?
That's a great question. I am still using Ethereum mainnet the most. I would say that I probably would have used it less this year, but because of the Denkun upgrade that happened, which like really helped with gas prices, and then the fact that just so much liquidity has migrated, so much economic activity has migrated to L2s and Solana and other, ecosystems, that, there's just so much growth there. So, I don't know if it's just, proof of like Ethereum scaling. It's also a combination of like liquidity migrating, but Ethereum mainnet has become usable again.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's, maybe you spend, the other day, I spent as little as like 10 cents doing some smart contract transactions. And that is just wild. That's mainly, by the way, the stuff I'm using there is like an Aave V3 or V2, Fluid by Instadap. I stake Prime through Parallel. What else is there off the top of my head? Okay, so then after Ethereum mainnet, though, it's probably Arbitrum, with a close second of being Base. I forget too. Pendle's another one. So Pendle's another like top application on Ethereum mainnet that I'm using a lot of. But yeah, I absolutely am enjoying Optimism too. Maybe there's a Arbitrum, Optimism, and Base are probably tied for me. Like I enjoy all of them. I've always had some distrust of Base. No offense to the team, like Jesse Pollock and them do great work. I've had more trust in decentralization happening on Optimism and Arbitrum. And to be fair, Arbitrum clearly beats out Optimism. Like there's criticisms there to be made of Optimism. There's shortcomings. They just haven't hit some of the milestones that Arbitrum has. And so yeah, it's been a joy to go from using Ethereum in 2020, 2021, contemplating having to spend $30, $40 on some transactions at the height of DeFi summer, to now on its worst day, I'm spending maybe a few dollars per transaction, but like on Ethereum mainnet, I'm spending under $1 on average, 1-2 Gwei prices. And on Base, Arbitrum, Optimism, I'm clocking in some transactions under 1 penny, which is just, amazing. Like I just, these aren't just like transfers. I'm not just transferring stable coins for cheap prices. Like I'm doing, LPs on like a Velodrum or Aerodrum and like able to really enjoy that. But yeah, I'm really excited for more of the looping applications too to grow on these L2s. I'm probably leaving out Contango is one that I've been using quite a bit for looping strategies, or Origami Finance. Those applications being available on L2s is huge, because you're doing really complicated transactions, depositing, borrowing, swapping, redepositing, and you're repeating that process over and over again to get to a levered position. So, we've come a long way. We've really grown a lot.
Mm-hmm. So I'm interested in this as someone who's been long-time Ethereum user. Speaking of you, would you say that a majority, let's say just Ethereum ecosystem, so Ethereum versus L2s, would you say that a majority of activity is on Ethereum mainnet or a plurality?
So off the top of my head, I actually don't know. I'd love to know. For me personally, I am still doing, let's say I'm doing like 50% of my activity there. Oh shoot, I left out Solana too. Like I have,
no one's going to come after you. Don't worry.
Yeah, I've done a lot of staking on Solana. I really enjoy Camino. I've really enjoyed MarginFi, but been a little bit disappointed by how that one has fallen off in terms of economic activity. But I still have DeFiDad.eth on my Twitter account. I like clearly have like a long time loyalty and allegiance to like what Ethereum has built. I do believe that like the market has overcorrected in terms of sentiment on Ethereum, and it's just a matter of time before like sentiment tends to follow the price action. So like as soon
Mhm.
as Ether pops in price, like, it's very reflexive. So we're going to see that
100%.
same sort of stuff, play out as we've seen in other cycles. And so, yeah, I continue to lean on Ethereum mainnet, probably for the same reason some people hold Bitcoin on chain on the Bitcoin network. If we're talking about having total assurance that I own something and no one else can gain access to it, and the network will continue to produce blocks, then there's nothing that compares to Bitcoin, and second to that or tied with it maybe is Ethereum, and I put Solana right there as like the third most prominent blockchain. So I can't break away from the lessons that we've learned over the years, like assuming that everything will just continue to work. Like we've seen some massive breakdowns, like Terra, being like the most terrifying example of that. And so I do wonder at times, like what happens if one of these L2s has, let's call it a breakdown, just
Yeah, worst
something.
case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. What if, for me with Base, I worry for them, like being a US based company.
Mhm.
I worry, like, what if we get even more authoritarian type figures in the government, and they really try to clamp down on taking control of Base. But that all that I said there, I think there's a less than 1% chance, but the fact that there's a chance there, I personally could not deposit like my entire on-chain portfolio into something like Base until I have more assurances. Whereas like Arbitrum seems to be moving along that path, whatever you want to call it, the roadmap that like an L2 beat follows, L2beat.com. They do a great
Mhm.
job of sort of like distinguishing like how decentralized or trustless is this L2. And L2s suffer from a lot of the same things that some early protocols that operate off of a multi-sig on anything from like a Solana to Ethereum mainnet to Cosmos. So we, whether people like it or not, the permissionlessness that's there doesn't always indicate that like something is safe to use or that it's like truly trustless. Like there are so many trust assumptions across DeFi, and it's probably one of the most frustrating things for me as like a, probably yourself as well, as like more like, I would put myself on the professional side of the users. I think like, how are early beginners supposed to like know all of this? And like, what happens when they get burned? Like you just named a bunch of Bitcoin L2s that I'm not aware of. And that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that they're not legitimate, but what if there's one that grows and, there's like a long-term scheme there to like, capture all this value from users and exploit them? Like it's
Yeah.
probably going to happen eventually. There will be an L2 that's like created by, I don't know, some bad actors, and it's going to, be able to
Mhm.
steal those funds from folks.
Here's an interesting question. Are there, besides Terra, are there any chains that had assets on them that shut down? I'm sure there must have been one at some point that people still had money on.
There's got to be another one. I'm not aware of what it would be off the
Maybe it was a
top
smaller
of my
one.
head, but there's also there's a lot of chains, L1s or maybe even some L2s that have just, shrunk in terms of their economic activity. And so I guess as long as that bridge exists and you can exit safely back to, another chain or an L1, you should be fine. But yeah, there's no doubt there's been a lot of there's a lot of ups and downs. I think of like Bitcoin is completely off on its own in terms of it's one chain that you could probably fall asleep for 5 years. I won't even say 10 years, 5 years, and wake up and be pretty safe in knowing that the chain is still producing blocks, and that your value is still there as long as your private key wasn't compromised.
Mhm.
Ethereum, I think, is the closest thing to it. And again, there's probably an argument to be made. Maybe have someone scream at me if they hear this on the podcast that it would come in second or maybe tied. And like I said, however much more you want to distinguish something like Solana, but I think at the end of the day, these blockchains represent a shared set of core values and beliefs, people that like are working synergistically together, whether they're running a node or whether they're a user or a developer. And that shared mind share is really remarkable on those three networks. And then toss in some of the, like I said, some of the L2s. Like I think Arbitrum deserves the most credit, after that, maybe followed by something like an Optimism or whatever L2 beat is ranking in terms of total liquidity deposited.
Yeah, and Arbitrum's really developed an amazing DeFi ecosystem too.
They have. They've been aggressively investing now as an ecosystem into Web3 gaming. Web3 gaming as a narrative has really suffered. It's fallen off. I've never been, I'm clearly not like a gaming expert, but like I'm a Web3 gaming enthusiast and investor. And to their credit, like they've just continued to put resources in the right places. And, there are new tokens that are launching. Like, we've had ZK Sync launch this year. We had the Starknet launch. And as much as those chains like, stand to grow a lot, I think in the future, I mean, it's pretty insane to see that like there was never a chase that's happened, at least as far as I've noticed, in terms of catching up with Arbitrum. Arbitrum just keeps growing, and it speaks to something there about the community. I mean, they've built a strong following of users and builders. So, kudos to them. I'm not an investor in Arbitrum, but I love using Arbitrum and been really just impressed by AJ Warner and the team.
To your credit, you were talking about Parallel and Prime way before it took off on Twitter. I mean, I remember seeing you talking about your the trading cards and opening packs and all that. I mean, I don't remember when you first started, but it was way back in 2023, and I kept thinking, I should check that out. And then I did eventually, but it was after I checked it out when the masses were getting in, right? You were in there way ahead of everyone else.
Like, to be honest, I have also lost plenty of ether on a lot of NFTs there that I bought, but yeah, there's a little bit of luck there. Like the Parallel team, it was always about the creativity of that team and the artwork that was driving like what they were building. There's just so many teams that professed that they were going to build what Parallel was building, but there is some sort of like no nonsense to the team, to the co-founders. I mean, I feel lucky because like I got into that Discord. I felt late to the game, but I was still like pretty early, and I was just struck by how little they cared about what the cynics were saying about them, but then how much they cared about their like early users and like, TCG fanatics, folks that were going to, move over from like a Magic or Pokemon and get interested in the game. And yeah, good example of like trying to take what was my transferable skill there. Like I was a user, I was trying to understand like how they were going to use. They were using all the different DeFi mechanisms. Actually, to their credit, they were talking a lot to me, just on the side, amongst many other people, about how they might use DeFi or ideas there. And man, to their credit, they've built such an incredible story. Like you watch it and it looks like something that, like, it looks like another franchise like Star Wars or something in the Marvel universe. Like it's really, really compelling storytelling. And they're a great example of using Web3 elements to just create more engagement with their audience. Like they didn't force it down everyone's throats. You did have to buy packs as NFTs, but I mean, that was like the simplest way to get folks on board. So yeah, really been exciting to watch watch them. And I tell anyone, like, go check out Parallel. Like, you haven't missed the train leaving the station. Like, the team is, the team has a trading card game that I don't know what the latest stats are, but like, I play it at least a few times a week. I've gone weeks where I've played it 6 hours a day, every day. I honestly, like, I had to like turn off my computer because I was like, I'm gonna, like, I wasn't sleeping at night. I was like playing this game late into the night, like working during the day. And then, like, as like a grown adult with children, like, I was like staying up late to play it. That was the greatest reassurance. I was like, wow, like, I'm not giving up on this, or like, there's no reason for me to be selling out of like the tokens that I had earned from holding NFTs. I was like, I'm actually just genuinely enjoying playing the game. And that is the rarest story. So to be fair, thank you for cherry picking Parallel. I've been wrong about a lot of things, but like, Parallel is probably, outside of like DeFi, the run up into DeFi summer, it's probably one of the best bets I've personally made, and I'm very, very proud of just being a part of that community.
Oh, it's interesting what you said about how you were so enthralled by the game yourself, because I feel like with DeFi, the number one thing I look for, the heuristic for whether something is a good investment, is often, is it something that I find useful, that I enjoy using? Because if I do, and I'm use a lot of DeFi, probably other people will too. If I use a lot of DeFi and I can't find a use for something, then, I mean, sometimes I'm just odd, but it's like, it's unlikely that tons of other people will if I can't see how I would ever use it over some other app.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'll bring it back to DeFi a moment. One example where just using the product was reaffirming why I thought others were going to use it was in summer 2022. Velodrome launched. They launched in the wake of the UST DPEG and Terra collapsing. I mean, it
I
was a
remember that.
total nightmare, right? Yeah, you know Velodrome well. And so Velodrome is at like 25 million fully diluted. I think it dropped actually to as little as 10 or 15 million dollars. But that team had a product that, for me, every week, so I bought some Velo and I staked it for 4 years. I like locked it up for 4 years, which, to be fair, like, I've done some of these lockups before, with V tokens, and sometimes it's a total disaster. It definitely doesn't always work out. But in this case, I was experimenting. So I locked up some tokens, and every week I was prompted to have to vote on which liquidity pools I was going to allocate rewards to. So for folks who don't know, Velodrome, instead of us as LPs earning trading fees, you earn emissions of the protocol tokens. So, Patrick and I as LPs, every week, we get to claim the LP fees, but we are deciding who's going to get the Velodrome token rewards. And it creates this incredible flywheel, which is really confusing if you look at it on paper and you have no idea like how this works. But I could attest that every week I was getting in there hours before the deadline, and I was looking at what are the highest forecasted APYs for the different liquidity pools. I was clearly focused on where are their real trading fees and where are their boosted rewards, kind of like trying to sift through like, well, I don't want to put it in this one because it has very little liquidity, but it's got tons of rewards. So like, this is almost like a fake APY. It's just, I'm going to get these rewards, but it's not the same as sustainable LPs. It really had me realizing, wow, this is a smart design. This is the most I've ever thought about like LP fees. I'm incredibly engaged with the protocol. I'm designating rewards to folks who I think deserve it, but also are going to reward me with like the best trading fees. And every week I did this, and I mean, I'm still doing it. I'm in Velodrome and Aerodrome every single week voting. I enjoy it. It's, sometimes I think about just putting it into, I think it's called a relayer, where you can just have it automatically decide for you like where it should go. But I'm it's a great example of something that like I could have never articulated the flywheel well enough to friends, but knowing it, I was like, whoa, I'm earning at some point I was earning, let's say like $100 per week. And I was shocked because I had put in, let's say like a few $1,000s originally. And the price of the token had gone up and down a lot, but I was earning these like outsized, predictable, fixed incomes through the protocol. So anyways, to this day, Velodrum, Aerodrome success on base, it was all making sense because I knew the team behind it. I knew how they had vested their tokens the same way that I was vesting in like a 4-year locked up token. And those details like could only be appreciated by someone who was like using the protocol. I don't think I could have read enough Twitter posts about it. So anyways, TLDR on this podcast is if you end up listening to this point, you should really try to figure out a way to incentivize getting yourself into protocols and playing with them, because there's so much edge in just playing around with the protocols.
Keep the podcast running in the background. Open up some actual DeFi products and start.
Go to velodrum.finance, go to aerodrum.finance. Great protocols like to play with. And like I said, full disclosure, I have tokens locked up for 4 years there, but I bought them on the open market, and it's been nothing but like a joy to be a part of those communities.
I have a funny story about Velodrome. I'll tell you off the record after. Final question is, what is the most exciting thing you've seen in crypto recently?
Oh, wow. That is a really tough one. Okay. I think the simplest answer is probably the ETH ETF. And behind that was the Bitcoin ETF. I recognize that, you know, these were big milestones for the industry, that it was like solidifying the fact that ETH and Bitcoin were commodities based on the judgment of the US government, and that like we were going to be able to see trillions of dollars in ETFs be able to potentially, you know, buy into or get exposure to ETH and Bitcoin. After that, though, you know, the most exciting thing in this cycle, if I'm measuring from like bottom of the bear market, let's say was November 2022, or for some assets, June 2022. And so there's been a run up since then. And I believe like we're probably in the second half of a bull run right now. I think restaking has been exciting. My only caveat to that is just that, you know, it's still so early, and like it's really going to be difficult to restake and manage risk properly. So we're still in this sort of like la la land of like there's no slashing with Eigenlayer, and Karak I think will follow the same sort of, you know, plan, and Symbiotic will follow a similar plan. And I'm guessing, I don't actually know the latest on Babylon, but I'm guessing that Babylon will not have any sort of slashing early on. Slashing just means that like if I restake and I hold ETH or Puff ETH or Renzo ETH or Kelps ETH, whatever they are, I don't have to worry about there being some event that would cause me to lose my principal. Like there's just, you know, they're not actually, the platform's not working as it's supposed to, but at some point there will be major slashing events. And so I say that it's one of the most exciting like parts of the industry because there's so much mind share there. There's so much liquidity in restaking. You know, the narrative has died down since the spring, but I think there's still a lot more growth. Like it's just an easy way for people to passively earn staking yield through Ethereum's proof of stake, but also to eventually earn some additional yield. However, I want to warn anyone, when Eigenlayer eventually goes fully live, like as in like slashing is live, I would say to like watch very, very carefully. And if you think that you're overexposed, it would make a lot of sense to, you know, to get out of some of that exposure, to limit how much exposure is there, because it's not going to be a risk-free yield. The risk-free yield, in my opinion, or near risk-free, is being able to stake ETH, being able to stake Sol. Bitcoin doesn't have a risk-free. Like they're trying to make it with a Babylon, but like Babylon's the equivalent of EigenLayer. So like the model's going to work very similarly, and it won't be risk-free. So you know, there is truly nothing like being able to stake ETH or Sol or whatever blue chip asset you think you're holding in the future. If there's proof of stake and the network is viable, like you've got a pretty awesome passive yield there to earn.
Well put. Well put. Yeah. For each of those networks, there's no risk-free rate, but staking is the equivalent of the risk-free rate for those assets, because if the proof of stake fails, then the entire network fails. So
Yeah.
there's really
bigger problems.
There's no or minimal additional risk you're taking on by staking ETH or Sol versus holding it. The only real thing is the unlocks, if there's a delay to unlock it.
That's right. And none of this is financial advice. Just quick reminder. Hopefully you learned something from everything I'm saying, but like don't like take the words I say and go make an investment. So that's not the goal here. Gotta learn yourself, do your own research. So
absolutely. Yeah, no, he's you know, we're educating people. But this has been really great, really fantastic interview. Glad we were able to get you on, and I'm sure that people will learn a lot. Thanks for coming on.
Dude, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Keep up the great work, and excited for your new podcast. And for folks that want to learn more about the Edge podcast or me, just follow me at DeFi_Dad on Twitter. And then there's links there to the link tree, which is Edge_pod. And that's where you can find we've done about 115 episodes now. So great place to learn from guests like Patrick and other builders we mentioned here on the podcast.